As we look at the different types of floaters that are available today, there's a lot of different hook sizes and sizes of the floats. So when you look down the path here, we have a couple different sizes that are available, and these are the most common. They start here really at a number 4 hook, and with a hook size, the higher the number, the smaller the hook is. So these are number 4 hooks. Then you get down to these right here, which are a number 2 hook, and these are a number 1 hook. And then these, once you go past 1, it goes into 1/0, and then what I don't have here is 2/0. Usually in a floating jig head, they don't go much bigger than a 2/0 hook, and you'll occasionally find them a little bit smaller than a 1/0, but for walleye, that's probably not ideal. The most common ones that you'll see on the Maumee, and the ones that I like to use most often, are these number 2 hooks and these number 1 hooks. Both of those hook sizes are ideal. These are Northland tackle hooks, and as you can see, what you want is a pretty strong hook here, and you want the float to be a medium-sized float. I most often don't like something bigger there, as I like that medium-sized hook. This one right here with the number 2 and the number 1s, depending on the size of the tail that I'm running, is your most commonly used tail there, or floating jig head. Now, the other thing that you have to be aware of is this information right here. So with floating jig heads, the Ohio regulation says that during the Maumee walleye run, which is March and April, you can't have more than a 1/2 inch gap between the shank, which is this portion right here, and the tip. So this gap right here can't be more than a 1/2 inch. If you look at this larger one here, which is a 1/0, that's still a legal hook to use. When you get into these smaller hooks like this, what I found out is these are pretty flimsy hooks because they have to be a smaller, lighter weight hook. They're usually used for smaller fish than a walleye, so I don't like to use those unless I'm running a really small tail and some finicky fish. The other thing that you have to be aware of is tails. You want your floating jig head, and oftentimes these number 2s and number 1 Northland floating heads, they fit perfectly onto a tail. So that's a number 1 hook there. Here's another one that's a number 1 hook. This is a different type of a tail, and it's a little bit longer, but it still fits really well, and that's a number 2 hook there. And then as you can see, these number 4 hooks, if you're running a very small tail, that's where you would be able to run that. You want your tail to fit onto your hook appropriately. Let me show you an example of one that doesn't often work very well, and that's this one. So you have a really large floating jig head, this down here, which is the 1/0, and then you have a small tail that just doesn't fit right, and it doesn't float well in the water. So that's a good example of something not to do when you're out there on the Maumee. So I think the other thing is, you know, the main part of the run, this is what you want. And I know that's where a lot of guys are fishing, so you want those number 1s and number 2s. I find either one of those are good. I really love the Northland floaters. They tend to have pretty strong hooks here. As you can see, I can just barely bend that, and the hook is also thin enough that it actually pierces the walleye's mouth. Sometimes when you get a hook that's a little bit too thick, what happens is it doesn't pierce that walleye's mouth as easily. So hopefully that helps you guys out when you're trying to decide what types of floaters do I get. Do I get a bigger one? Do I get a smaller one? Me personally, avoid the smaller stuff, avoid the bigger stuff. Stay in that number 2 or number 1 hook, and you should be good for most of the walleye run. Thanks a lot, guys.